Well, good morning, everyone. Bill Rentschler, along with Sports Director Kevin Sjuts in the 1011 Now streaming studio. Kevin, it seems like this offseason has gone maybe a little bit faster than usual. Nebraska, it feels like a lot of good news coming out of Nebraska football with the hiring of Matt Rule and all the things that he's done. But today we finally kind of had the rubber meet the road. Day one. Spring practice begins under Matt Rule and his administration.
Football season?
It's football
we talking
season,
about
right?
football?
We're absolutely talking about football. And so we heard from Coach Rule today, as well as several other players. You and Eddie Messel were down there. I guess kind of just initially, what are kind of your big, broad takeaways from what you guys heard today?
Well, Matt Rule was wearing shorts, and they practiced outside when it was 35 degrees. So that goes to show how he's just a different breed. But Coach Rule is very excited, and he made no bones about, he even couldn't sleep last night. Though he's been in the coaching game for decades, he still had that anxiety. Part of it, I'm sure it was curiousness, too. He's watched his team do workouts over the offseason, and he even admitted he loves the mat drills. He loves seeing these guys really put in the work in January and February, but now it's football. And he's very cautious to evaluate this team. He's mainly looking at it from how responsible are these guys? Are they making the right choices? And he said at the very beginning of his interview today that everybody was on time, everybody was dressed appropriately.
Maybe except for him in the shorts.
Well, apparently appropriately would be wearing shorts. And they're a coachable group. That was a word that kept coming up. So, again, he's not looking to make sure that the quarterbacks can throw the ball 45 yards downfield or a guy can have the right blocking assignment. It's more about the minor, that aren't so minor things in terms of running a program. And it seemed everything checked the box. I mean, Matt seemed pretty happy following the first practice.
I was kind of surprised. Usually day one, especially day one of spring practice of a new coaching staff, a press conference might not give us that much insight. I felt like we did get some good insight into kind of what went on and how some of the players are doing. And I thought it was interesting. He said, if the quarterbacks, they're going to throw outside. They're going to throw in the wind. They're not going to throw inside. Because, it's Lincoln, Nebraska. There's going to be wind most of the time. Right.
It's interesting. That was one of your observations. That's one of the first things I said to Eddie when we got done with the interview was, wow, that was fairly newsy. Figured that like all first practices, that there were going to be the pleasantries of, we're excited. It was so great to be back out there. But Matt was pretty direct with some personnel decisions, some guys that have left the program. Chris Hickman, James Carney, Tyreek Johnson also talked about some position changes that are going to be happening. And then, of course, one of the biggest newsworthy items from today, running back Anthony Grant, currently suspended. It sounds like there are some, I guess, program standards that he's not quite meeting at the moment. Same for Tommy Hill. He did not practice today.
And I thought it was interesting. Again, he talked kind of in his preseason press conferences about he likes to move players around and kind of find their best spots. And so we already heard about a couple guys that, again, it's day one of spring practice. Jake Applegate, it sounds like, is maybe spending some time at tight end. You have Janarian Bonner, who's maybe getting kind of flexed out to a tight end, wide receiver hybrid position. So, again, like you said, a really newsy kind of day. I thought it was a really interesting press conference.
Yeah, Jake Applegate, one of the names that is, coaches sometimes are very slow to call players out by name because they don't want to place too high of expectations or pressure, especially during a practice setting. Matt doesn't seem to really fall in line with that. He is more than willing to say Gabe Ervin was the star of the offseason and A.J. Allen has a lot of talent. And then Jake Applegate, that's a name that, folks around here, they will recognize it. He was a star at Lincoln Southeast High School. And now it sounds like they're trying to find a way for him to get on the field. And one of the ways for that possibly to happen is to change his position.
Over to a tight end spot. We heard from some players. It was Luke Reimer. Who else did we hear from today?
Luke Reimer was the first to speak, so that's a veteran on the defensive side of the football. Gabe Ervin talked. Heinrich Harburg wearing the green quarterback jersey. Even though he was wearing the green jersey, they were Heinrich fielded many questions about a possible position change because that has been speculated. And Ethan Piper, one of the veteran offensive linemen, also talked today. He's working at left guard, also at center. He's willing to do whatever. And Piper was pretty forthcoming about, like, first day of practice, yeah, it's good to be out there, but there's not a whole lot that you can learn about a team after one day from a football standpoint. And one of the great quotes of the day, we bend well. is what Piper said. I mean, because again, they're not fully padded up. They're not hitting. You know, nobody's making a splash play on the first day of practice. But he said, we bend well.
Well, that's more than I can say because I do not bend well anymore. But it sounds like, I think Luke Reimer said he had his alarm set at 4:30.
Yeah.
He's ready to go. And it sounds like Matt Rule also said that these early practices probably not going to be the norm, but he had to do this one this early today so the team could have the Saturday of Easter off.
Yeah, so this wasn't like, we're going to test these boys on day one, make them get here before the sun rises. It was more, they just wanted to practice today. And of course, they're student athletes. They're coming off of spring break, so they needed to find the right time slot for them to practice and not interfere with the academic portion of their lives. So that's why they practiced at 6 a.m. They got going. They wrapped up around 8 a.m. That's not going to be standard procedure for Matt Rule and his coaching staff, but they will practice in the morning, and that's become more of a trendy thing to do in college football. It's what Scott Frost and his staff did. They wanted to practice in the morning. Previously, Mike Riley, Bo Pelini, they practiced in the afternoon, but it sounds like Rule's going to be a morning guy, not just for the spring, but also for the fall season. I think that's their preferred time. But I feel like Rule and his staff is a little bit more flexible on what it might look like moving forward with this spring season. Nebraska's standard practice time will be at about 8 a.m.
And on screen here, you see this is the spring practice schedule. So again, like Kevin just mentioned, they just got done with spring break. They hit it early today. They'll practice again on Tuesday and Wednesday. They'll have a day off, and then they'll be back at it Friday, and then again Saturday, and you can go on down the list. And well, can't see it there. I'll take down the ticker. The spring game set for April 22nd. So again, they have a month here of spring practice, 15 practices, obviously the 15th being that spring game. Thankfully, again, this was the one and only that's going to start at 6 a.m.
Yeah, it's the early morning one. Again, they're going to practice in the morning. What's different about this spring football under Matt Rule, oftentimes Nebraska spring practice, in fact, I can't think of a time in which spring practice didn't start before spring break. Usually, the coach would have them go through 5-6 workouts, and then the team would break for the semester break, and then they come back and they have that big stretch right leading up to the red-white scrimmage. Under Coach Rule, he let them have their time. You know, they did all of their winter conditioning. They wrapped that up with a very fun week of competition.
Commitment
and it was
week,
kind of a commitment week.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of fun. They went over to the ice box. They played sand volleyball.
With a medicine ball.
Yeah, they did a bunch of different things. They had some fun. Then the team went out on their semester break. They came back, and now it's football. They don't practice every single day of the week, but as you could tell on that schedule, it's going to be pretty consistent that they're going to get going. Monday's typically going to be a day off, so they practice again on Tuesday. It's going to be closed. There's no media access. Wednesday is pro day for Nebraska's players hoping to get into the NFL. Then Thursday, the group is back on the practice field with Coach Rule. So they've got a busy week. And though there is some structure and routine to it, it's going to be pretty hectic for these guys all the way leading up to the red-white scrimmage on April 22nd.
And I'll be interested we will eventually hear from most of the coaches, Tony White, defensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, offensive coordinator. But the installation of the new offense and the new defense, I would wonder if, you know, not putting spring break in the middle of all that will help go along with some of that install and stuff like that.
I think part of it is how much do you want to put on your players while they are on semester break. So they could have started installing that defense before the semester break. But then are you going to tell them, hey, while you are with your family doing whatever you might be doing over that week, do you want them to stay in the playbook? With this staff, I feel like it was, all right, we did the weight training, go enjoy the week. When you come back, now we're getting after it. I, like you, I'm looking forward to talking to those assistant coaches, and I appreciate the fact that each of them has come in front of the cameras, and we've all been able to talk to them and ask our preliminary questions. How did you get to Nebraska? What was the process like joining Coach Rule's staff? In the case of Donovan Raiola, how did that all go down with him being retained? And that's one thing that Ethan Piper talked about today, is that he's very thankful that Coach Raiola is still here, and he likes that consistency, says he's a great man, and he's looking forward to learning from Coach Raiola again, who is now entering his second season with the Huskers. So week by week, practice by practice, we'll learn a little bit more about where they're at with the installation process. How competitive are they being during spring practice? And then we'll try to get some information on what does the depth chart look like? How do these attempted position change? How are they going? And then, of course, Nebraska goes into the spring with a massive roster. How do they get it down to 85 scholarship players? I'm sure there are a number of guys on this team that are committed to going through spring football, but once it's done,
we'll see where they go. If they stick around or if they look for another opportunity.
They will have, there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made.
And I think also, we haven't talked about it yet, but an interesting quarterback battle this spring. Again, Casey Thompson, again, the returning starter. I don't think you could find very many Nebraska fans out there who would say they weren't rooting for Casey last year and that he laid it all on the line. But they brought in that quarterback transfer from Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims. Casey out for the spring, can't throw. Matt Rule mentioned that today, as well as Logan Smothers not practicing. So that Jeff Sims, assumedly, is going to get a lot of reps with ones. So kind of, what does that battle look like? What does that spring game look like? You know,
it might be one of the reasons why Heinrich Harburg is staying at quarterback right now, because they have some quarterbacks that are not participating in spring, and they need guys to take snaps, and they like Heinrich a lot. So that makes sense. I'm with you. The quarterback position will not solve itself this spring.
No,
because Casey's not even practicing.
Correct.
And Logan Smothers practicing. So it's hard to really glean anything. It's going to make for a fascinating fall with Matt Rule, Marcus Satterfield, and these quarterbacks. Who's going to lead the offense? I don't even know if you could say that Casey's the odds-on favorite. I think that he is because of his experience. We know one thing of Casey Thompson, and that is he is tough as nails.
Yes.
And he's not afraid of a challenge.
Yes, absolutely.
But Jeff Sims is known to have NFL caliber talent. And if you think about the transition for Jeff to come here to Lincoln and team up with Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield, and then, oh, by the way, you're going to get a lion's shares of the reps at quarterback in the spring because the incumbent starter is sidelined. Jeff has to be thrilled about that opportunity.
Yeah, so that'll make for a really interesting wrinkle through spring ball, and again, obviously, as we get into fall camp a couple months down the line. So any other big takeaways from today that really caught your attention at all, Kevin?
It was kind of cold. It was windy. After we got done with the interviews, we went inside Memorial Stadium. It was just, anytime you're there, it's so good, right? Whether it's March or September, it was great to be back inside the stadium. And I think one thing, it's hard to put into words, but sometimes you just get a feeling about things. Just being there, being around these players, knowing that they now have a new coaching staff, it just feels clean, it feels healthy, and it doesn't seem like these guys know they must perform now, or that the new coach is watching their every move. It seems like everybody's on the same page, and that's what I mean by it seems healthy.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Matt Rule is putting new standards and expectations in place. I think everybody seems to be aligned with this coaching staff. And again, it's hard to articulate that. It's just something felt. And you could feel that just being at Memorial Stadium this morning.
Well, and you could feel even outside Memorial Stadium last year, again, with Scott Frost and his staff, everyone knew if you're not going to win a couple games here, where it was going to go. That's gone. So you're a clean slate. And again, Coach Rule, by all accounts, has won the offseason. He's said all the right things, but now it's time to, kind of get that install done and see what the on-field product kind of looks like.
And I try to be a pretty measured guy, Bill. I try not to get too hyped, too excited, and place undue expectations on any team. And I've been given the way that Nebraska football has been over the past 10 to 15 years, everything is with great hesitation right now. And I've tried to not get all in on, not just jump on the Matt Rule train, but put on my seatbelt and order the first-class meal.
Yes.
Like, we're trying not to do that. But every time that I walk away from an interview with Coach Rule, the players, his assistant coaches, they're winning me over, Bill.
It's hard not to drink the Kool-Aid. I have a couple buddies who are fully invested, bought in the Kool-Aid. For me as a fan, again, it's hard not to. And I'm sure, again, for you as trying to be an objective observer and reporting on the team, it can be tough because, again, he seems like a really nice guy. He knows what he's doing, and he seems to set a good culture, a player kind of forward-centric culture. You know, he talks about wanting to make sure players have the best recovery and things like that. So
I'm very curious, though, once they start putting the pads on, and they say they're going to be fairly physical this spring because they want to learn about the guys and how they hit. They're not just going to be tagging off. What does Matt and these coaches think about the talent level of the team? They seem to like it right now. And this coaching staff has watched a ton of film.
Yep.
They have dissected all the games from the past year, and they know that there were some late game struggles, and they know that there was an injury situation at some pretty key spots, especially on the offensive line. But once they get this group and they ramp up what they want to do physically, how do they evaluate the team? Are they going to say that they have some deficiencies and some things they need to make up in recruiting? Or do they say, no, we have a group that can win right now? Because Nebraska's schedule is not as tough as it was last year. Though it does start with a conference game on the road that's going to be unique. They're going to go out to Colorado and play.
Coach Prime.
But what do they think of the team? And do they have the pieces for them to win games? Because ultimately, this is what it's going to come down to, Bill. I think this fan base has become fairly impatient.
Yep.
They're going to give Matt and this coaching staff some grace and some patience, but how much of it? And does Coach Rule feel like they can win right now? I think that's really the one curiosity I have of this spring is once they start seeing football, where does Matt, a veteran coach who has coached in the NFL for a lengthy time at the college ranks, where does he think they're at?
And that will be the questions we get answered, hopefully, here over the next couple of weeks. Again, we will hear from Coach Rule again, I believe, on Saturday.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Ooh, no, Coach Rule. We'll hear from the team on Thursday.
We'll hear from the team on Thursday. I believe it's secondary coach Evan Cooper and defensive line coach Terrence Knighton. Pot roast, my favorite coach on the staff. Just because
I can't wait to hear from Evan Cooper. I mean, he's young, so much energy, and you talk about. I just talked about the talent on the team. That's the group, in my opinion, that probably is the most stable. Returning guys like Malcolm Hartzog and Marquise Buford and Miles Farmer. I could keep on talking, but they have pieces on the back end of the defense, and I think that might be the group that leads this defense as they transition to the 3-3-5.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Again, you had some losses on the defensive line, so I think that back seven, I think would.
You like pot roast?
I do like pot roast.
The nickname, what? Just
all of it. I love the whole package. Again, it's just wonderful. I love him. Again, I looked up some of his highlights from the Broncos just because. How can you not like a guy
I
like
that his only time coming to Nebraska was for a Jagged Edge concert. And he got me to YouTube Jagged Edge, and one day I was driving to work, and believe it or not.
You got Jagged
I was
Edge
listening to Jagged Edge. So he has broadened my horizons.
There you go. So that'll be Thursday. We'll hear from Coach Cooper, Coach Knight, and a couple defensive players. We won't hear from Coach Rule again until after practice on Saturday. Kevin, you and Eddie will have all of the highlights, all the breakdown, almost every day that we're allowed in. For today, again, we have a full press conference as well as just little sound bites from Coach Rule on 1011now.com. We'll have player interviews up here later this morning or early this afternoon, so you can get all of your content there on 1011now.com as well as on the news app. So,
yeah, then we got team coverage coming up tonight.
Yep.
On the news. So
tune in
looking
at
forward
6
to
and
it.
10.
It's football season. We're in the middle of March Madness, and here we are spending a lengthy amount of time talking Nebraska football.
I know. It just gives me butterflies. I get all jittery and excited about it. All right. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you stopping by and giving us your time. Appreciate everyone for watching and tuning in. Again, as always, like I just said, keep it tuned to 1011 both on air and online for all of your news, weather, and sports.